Welcome to analysis number 6. This is a game between Agigas and Darlian in round 8 of a best of 3 tournament. And at this point in time, Agigas is 7-0 and Darlian is 6-1 in terms of round score. Right now, this is a game between, as you can see, Ashe Noxes and Zoe Invoke with Splashing Atrocity. It is mono Targon aside from Atrocity. So we'll get into the game now. I will be speeding through it. There is a few moments where, while recording, Agigas alt tabbed, so the video gets a little bit interrupted, but we'll just speed through it for now. There's a lot of critical moments, so this is going to be a longer analysis video. So here, turn 2, we play Icefield Archer to answer the Mountain Goat. We get 3 free phase damage, and the 2-drops trade 1 for 1. We don't really want to fall behind on board for no reason here. It's just a clean trade. So now we play Rhyme Wolf because we want to kill. So here, I just want to mention that while he wants to play Avaros and Trapper because it curves out a little bit better, it is also important to be responsive here. He wants to be able to deal with the Zoe. It is quite threatening, and if they manage to save Zoe somehow, we will have options to, for example, to try again. But because we only get to attack once every 2 turns, it is very difficult to kill the Zoe if we don't get it in right away. So giving us more opportunities to do that, we play Rhyme Wolf on turn 3. Opponent possibly considering whether or not to attack with the Mountain Goat or something. I'm not actually certain. So now in this position, our opponent, I assume, passes. There's not really any reason to. Okay, no, after playing the gem. I was thinking about the Super Cool Star Chart, whether or not they would play Super Cool Star Chart, but there's no reason to play Super Cool Star Chart right away. But here the gem makes a lot of sense because you cannot play it if Agigas, for example, open attacks, which would be, well, which would be very good for Agigas if they didn't play the gem. So now in this position, now that they gemmed, the open attack will cause the Rhyme Wolf to die. So in this position, you can choose to pause the video if you want, but you can also tell me, or you don't have to tell me, but your intuitive answer might also be, what would be your intuitive play in this position? Now, as I'll continue the video now, whether or not you've made your decision, but now Agigas chooses to open attack, and the reason for this is simply because he wants to kill the Zoe. And open attack is pretty much the best way to guarantee that Zoe dies. Now, he said, for example, I suggested that we play Ashe, and he said that the reason he didn't play Ashe is simply because he was afraid of cards such as the following. A second Zoe, which would allow him to paddle star our Ashe. Now, the key is that if, for example, they play the second Zoe, their Zoe will at least die. And if we were to not play the Ashe and they had second Zoe, then in that position, they would just replay Zoe. And we essentially traded our wolf for 1 mana. Well, technically 2, and we also lost our attack token. And in that position, they have a second Zoe, and that's bad. So we're going to set aside that situation. And so let's say we'll use another example that Agigas provided, which would be to Crescent Strike. Our opponent could pay 5 mana to Crescent Strike if we were to play an Ashe, but the problem is that they would have paid 5 mana their round 4, and they would have done essentially nothing but protect Zoe, whereas we would have got our Ashe out, we would develop our board very quickly, and we would threaten a lot of damage round 6. They're only going to have round 5 to develop, whereas we're going to have already Ashe, Rhyme Wolf. We can play cards like Trifarian Glory Seeker plus Trapper round 5, and then open attack round 6. And they're not going to be able to have a lot of defense because, well, first of all, they already use their Super Cool Star Chart, so that even reduces the amount of blockers they can play. And overall, if they were to play Crescent Strike, it would be weak. Now, the third and final way Agigas said he was scared of them protecting Zoe with would be, for example, if they use Super Cool Starter into Equinox. Now, again, I don't think that's very scary because they're paying 3 mana just to remove Challenger from Rimefang Wolf, essentially, and we just get to swing in for 8. Now, he said, of course, that he doesn't prioritize the face damage because he's going for the Ashe one-turn kills. Now, the key I want to mention is that even if you go for Ashe one-turn kills, that doesn't mean you have to go for 20 damage. You can threaten to deal, I don't know, say 17 damage, but if they're instead at 8 health instead of 17, as an example, or 9 health, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to prevent lethal, and even if they do, it will be very expensive. So the thing is that you can convert pressure into value simply because your opponent is paying more to survive. And it's essential. I do think that Ashe would have been the stronger play here, even though the open attack guarantees the Zoe kill. Now, again, the final option, assuming that they don't protect Zoe in any of those ways, is simply that they play a unit. Now, if they do play a unit, it gets instantly frostbitten by Ashe, and and then you can pull Zoe the same way and either kill their unit for free or get 5 face damage for free. So ultimately, in that scenario, it would be the same result. And I don't think that the other scenarios, which includes Crescent Strike, Equinox, and Paddle Star, counts as sufficient punishes. Alternatively, as a side note, if they were to go with the second Zoe, we would have the option of, for example, passing before they play Paddle Star, just to see if they choose to either pass back and make us lose the attack token, or and they don't kill our Ashe. But that's a story for another time. It's just a choice that would occur in the position, as I thought it would be interesting to mention. So this happens a couple times throughout the video. So the trade happens. Now, in this position, he said that, okay, so the trade went through, our opponent played Scryer, and we played Trappers. So he said that one of the reasons he didn't play Ashe was because we wanted to shuffle Yetis into our deck. And I mentioned that I think that you shouldn't be in a rush to shuffle Yetis in your deck if you don't have Assessor in your hand. Because the thing about Trapper is that it takes 2 draws. It cuts into 2 draws in exchange for giving you the Yeti. Now, of course, the Yeti is a very strong play, but without drawing Assessor and also slowing down our drawing of the Assessor can be could potentially be costly, simply because you won't have the resources if you're paying 2 cards for a 5/5 when you don't have the Assessor. Not to say that you should not play Trapper unless you have Assessor, but that you shouldn't prioritize playing Trapper so much, even at the cost of playing Ashe and getting tempo, if you don't have the Assessors, because there are downsides that come with it. Now, in round 5, we play Hearthguard. It's the most logical play. I'm pretty sure there's no questions there. Our opponent is right now vomiting a billion cards onto the board. And here they pick Charger. And now and they full swing, which you can consider a bluff for Pale Cascade, but the thing is, while we would never call the bluff, we should still assume that they have Pale Cascade for the future. So in this position, it's one thing to not call the bluff and say and play around Pale Cascade by blocking the 2/1, for example, but it's a whole other thing to remember if they have Pale Cascade in their hand in the future. So now in this position, not only do we assume they have Pale Cascade, we should also keep that in mind for the future. Now, some of you may consider to Brittle Steel the Charger right now and block it, but we're not in a rush to make that Brittle Steel, because Brittle Steel is a overall strong card. It's a cheap card. We're gonna have opportunities to use it later. This 2 extra face damage is not a big price. We don't like pre-committing spells if we don't have to, especially since we know that they have Pale Cascade. Now, again, in this position, we, of course, open with Glory Seeker with the idea to play Glory Seeker into Ashe. However, they play Meteor. And this means that there's a change of plans. Now, we're not so hot in terms of the tempo plan, so instead, we go for the Yeti because we don't have that many ways to spend our mana efficiently. We want to be able to get some value. We want to get good attacks. Attacking with Ashe is not strong, because our opponent has, for example, Pale Cascade, and we wouldn't even have the mana to Flash Freeze. So they could just trade the Scryer plus Pale Cascade for Ashe, and we could do nothing about it. So now, as we can see here, they did have the Pale Cascade, they used it early, which means that our Brittle Steel gets to answer it. Of course, Pale Cascade still draws a card, so we're not really winning as much card advantage as we could be if Pale Cascade was a fair combat trick. However, again, this is the best we can get, and it's much better than if we were to pre-commit Brittle Steel for no reason 2 turns prior, if you were considering that. So now in this position, our opponent plays a 4-mana warrior, and there's a very interesting decision point here. So now they pull our Ashe, and we have the option of either playing Flash Freeze or Troll Chant. And now these two options are very distinct. Now, if they have Hush and we Flash Freeze, they could, for example, Hush the Frostbite off of the Warrior, and then trade into the Ashe anyway, which would force us to play Troll Chant. In this position, we are left with a 5/2 Ashe, and we take 1 damage on our Ashe. Alternatively, if they have Hush and we play Troll Chant first, then they may Hush their Warrior, and then we'll have to Flash Freeze anyway, and we don't take any damage on our Ashe. So assuming they have Hush, Troll Chant is slightly better. However, assuming they have Pale Cascade, and if for example we play Troll Chant, they play Pale Cascade again, which granted the probability is slightly lower, the reward for playing Flash Freeze first is much higher, because if we played Troll Chant first and they played Pale Cascade, we would have to Frostbite anyway. So and we wouldn't even kill it. So what would happen is that they would still have the Warrior alive, and with 1 HP, granted, but we would have to commit both of our cards if they have Pale Cascade. If we Flash Freeze first and they Pale Cascade, we'd only take 2 damage on our Ashe, and we can save Troll Chant for a more critical moment. So I actually slightly prefer... Also, if they have both, then we Flash Freeze and they will use Hush instead of Troll Chant, which I think is the biggest upside, because if we were to Troll Chant and give them the Pale Cascade, it's much weaker than if we were to Flash Freeze and force them to Hush instead of using Pale Cascade. Because Hush is not only a more valuable card, but Pale Cascade answers Troll Chant a lot better. So I actually slightly prefer Flash Freeze here, but if for example, we absolutely assume that they're going to Hush, then technically Troll Chant does provide slightly higher value. Also, I will also mention that Troll Chant actually serves for Ashe as well. If you want to focus on saving the Frostbite for an Ashe OTK, Troll Chant actually works as well, because our opponent has a lot of units with less than 3 attack, and they don't have to be Frostbitten to trigger Ashe. As long as they're 0 attack, it works. In this position, you always play Icefield Archer, because if they play, for example, a large unit, then our Ashe will freeze it anyway. It doesn't make a difference, so we want the attackers. And also, even if we don't go for the Harsh Winds, all of their units are going to have 1 attack anyway, so our Icefield Archer doesn't even have unfavorable traits. Now, in this position, as I mentioned before, we want to go... even though we commit Harsh Winds and we allow them to survive if they were to Hush our Ashe, it's still worth it, simply because, for example, they're paying resources to survive. They're paying Hush and 3 blockers to survive. Now, this is the same idea as how Nexus damage is gonna be equal to value if you have pressure later, simply because they're gonna have to pay more resources to survive. As an example, if they were at 3 Nexus health, they would also have to sacrifice the Scryer to survive. Just as an example. Of course, that's not the case here. That's why even if you're going for OTKs, you should still value Nexus damage to an extent. Now, in this position, our opponent plays a bunch of units, and we only have Crystal Arrow. We should save the Crystal Arrow for the attack token, and Agigas does so correctly. We need to find ways to mitigate the attack with good blocks, and then use the Crystal Arrow on offense, and force our opponent to go down a lot in order to, if he wants to survive. I'm just going to skip forward a few seconds. So our opponent played Golden Sisters during this few seconds, and we still don't Crystal Arrow. We don't want to, we want to play to the way that we win, and that's using it on attack. For example, if we use it defensively here, our attack becomes incredibly weak, and then they can just survive, and then we have to keep dealing with their attacks with this board. And so what we want to do is we make it so they can only have this attack, and then they have to waste all of their blockers surviving somehow. Or alternatively, they have to make a bunch of new blockers. However it goes, they're going to have to give up a lot to survive. And the less health they have, the more that would be the case. Now, in this position, how would you take the block? So I'll go back a bit so you can see the attack. So how would you block here? Now, our opponent keeps the Scryer back, which is fair. It's not really a great attack anyway, but whether or not it's correct is hard to say. So in this position, if you've paused the video and thought about it, our Agigas here blocks the Moon Dreamer and the Celestial Doggo. Now the Celestial Doggo, this makes a lot of sense. It's the most highest value blocks, most efficient. We have to block the Doggo or else we die. Well, now here's the thing. This brings us to 1 HP, which means that we are not playing around Pale Cascade. So we are at this point, we are saying that we lose the Pale Cascade, so we assume they don't have it. However, in this position, we should also block the Golden Sister because we can't answer Atrocity. They could Atrocity literally a 1-attack unit and we would lose the game. So we should also block the Golden Sister with our 3-1 and so that they can't actually Atrocity win. And this might seem like we're not playing to our outs, but the thing is our attack is very strong even if we give up the 3-1 for a bit of safety. We're in a relatively strong position. A lot of top decks are very strong. So by probability, it's not that likely for us to get punished for giving up the 3-1 just to play around Atrocity. It's actually quite likely that they have Atrocity as well. So overall, I prefer blocking the 4-3. And the reason we use the 3-1 instead of the 4-2, as I said, is we're not playing around Pale Cascade anyway. Our Ashe ends up going to 2 health. I mean, and we are playing at 1 health. Now, alternatively, if we block the Golden Sister with the 4-2 and not block with Ashe, there is a case where we say that we are now at 3 HP and we don't actually have to play around Atrocity. I mean Pale Cascade, so we can say that they might have it rather than Atrocity, but I think playing around Atrocity makes more sense because they had opportunities to play Pale Cascade and didn't have it, whereas they didn't have opportunities to play Atrocity, which is why the probability that they have Atrocity is higher. Now in this position, you should always play Babbling Beard. Our opponent is also low on cards, and the thing is, Crystal Arrow is Area of Effect, and not only that, but all of their units are 3 or less health. So even if they play a large unit, we can target the large unit and it will still freeze all of the current units. So you should always develop here before playing your Crystal Arrow. Now, of course, we play the Crystal Arrow. This was the entire plan. We need to be able to chip down all of their value here for free. And in this position, we have another interesting decision, and that is whether or not we play the Assessor before we attack, or if we... Okay, hold on. Our opponent first plays the Doggo and Gem. Anytime. Okay, so our opponent gemmed the Golden Sister and played the Celestial Doggo. Right now, we have the option of full attacking and frostbiting the Doggo, which would force our opponent to have either Hush, Pale Cascade, or I think those are the only ones. I think those are the only possible ways to survive here. Oh no, or Star Shaping doesn't save them. So we know they don't have Pale Cascade. We know they might have Hush. Now they did play 1 Hush, or no, they played 2 Hushes already. So the probability that they survive isn't that high if we go for it. I don't hate it, but I actually also like the Assessor. So it's actually really hard to say whether or not it's correct. The probability that they survive is low, but Assessor is also a very strong play. Assessor doesn't actually lose to that much. Now in this position, we no longer threaten lethal because we can't play the Flash Freeze. However, Actually, I think flash freeze right away and attacking might have been better. It's extremely hard to say. But the problem is that we die to the attack because we don't get to draw our cards, and we're going to have no cards in the hand. So the thing is, with that play, as long as they survive the attack, however they do it, we're going to die for sure. And that's kind of risky. Whereas with Assessor, even if they survive the attack, we might not lose. So I do slightly prefer the Assessor, but it's hard for me to do a mathematical comparison on which one is superior. Now, in this position, I really like that we don't attack with Ashe, because now even if we attack with Ashe, it's not going to be lethal. So this way we give ourselves an extra attack. So we're in 2 rounds, we're still going to threaten lethal, and it's going to be very, very strong. So I really like that we didn't attack with Ashe there. And now our opponent plays Star Shaping to heal and plays Great Beyond. And of course, we know that we can answer this, and our opponent is really hoping that we can't. So, I mean, these plays go without saying. And again, we know they don't have Pale Cascade because their top deck card has been essentially other cards. And now we finally go for lethal one more time. They've used all of their hushes. Basically, they don't have Pale Cascade, so finally this is going to be lethal. And actually, given all things considered, it looks like they wouldn't have had a way to prevent lethal if we attacked with Flash Freeze before playing Assessor there. But again, I think the thing... Oh, whoops, my YouTube recommended. I think the thing is, right... Okay, so here are some notes I had. I think the thing is that if they had it to survive, we still would have been able to survive. For example, if we played with our Assessor draws and their draws, we would have been able to survive even if they had Pale Cascade or Hush. But if they had it and we committed, we would have lost. So I think if we assume that they probably have Pale Cascade or Hush, then this line was definitely better. But the probability that they had it was low enough that it's very hard to tell which one is superior. So again, I'm not 100% certain. Both are very valid plays. We did manage to win, but I mentioned all the points that I thought were relevant. I hope it was interesting. Again, because this isn't chess, we don't have engines, it's hard for me to provide all the objective best plays, but instead I offer different lines and all the most important reasonings you should consider when making your lines, and hopefully that is helpful to you.